I have a very special guest, Melinda Boyer, who I've known for many years. Hi, Melinda.
Hi, Jeff. It's so great to be on your show.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure. I've known you for quite a while. I know it's Don. It's 2014, and it's basically Don and you, so it has to be 2014.
Yes. I can't believe it's been that long. And what a great show. Everybody has to think better, right?
Yes, it all starts with the thinking.
Absolutely. It all starts with the mind.
Yes. And I remember you in 2014, and I know you now. And what a difference.
Oh, we talked about that
Yes,
the other
we
day.
did, and it's so true.
Yeah.
You've grown so much.
Well, I got to say, being around great mentors has really improved my way of thinking, and coming from a corporate life, right?
Yes.
Has been a life-changing experience for me for sure.
Well, the corporate world, I did it. You did it. And we both are doing something different. It must be a reason, the entrepreneurial spirit, I call it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I know I worked for a company for a couple of years. Great training, great work. But the other person was trying to come out.
Oh, yeah.
That entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And I didn't even know what was happening. It just came out.
Well, I can remember working the corporate world and going into the job, right? And then I'd have to go to like a client to go check. I used to do audits. And I used to go out and I used to think, gosh, how wonderful it is just to be outside, right? Instead of being stuck in the office. And I remember thinking to myself, man, if I could just stay home. But at that time, I was thinking staying home was a good thing, right? And then in 2002, I actually found a wonderful man, which is my husband today, Don Boyer. And he had that entrepreneurial spirit, right? That I didn't know, and I'll tell this funny story. When I first met him, he had all these, Post-its, like posted all over the place, right?
Sounds familiar.
And I remember seeing all that, and I, not being aware of what that really meant, right? They were all affirmations, right? I had no clue what an affirmation was. But I remember, okay, now either I am dating a guy who is talking to himself, which might be a little crazy, right? Or he's putting something in his mind, which I thought, okay, could still be kind of crazy. But I didn't realize, all I knew is he had these books like everywhere, right? He's an avid reader. And I thought, okay, so am I dating like this crazy man that's like obsessed with stuff or what, But I didn't realize until after, but I knew let me go back. I knew that there was something special about him, right? And I knew that how he carried himself and how he thought was completely different from anything I was ever involved in, right? I mean, I was so out of it with the whole corporate world. But once I got to know him and really started to really understand what was really happening, a year later, we ended up getting married, and he told me, one of these days, I'm going to take you out of that corporate world that right? And come home and build a business, build an empire together. And it was kind of interesting to me because when I first heard that, I was like, are you crazy?
Right. It's the corporate world is not the same way.
You're gonna take me away from making a every week paycheck and supporting my children and having health care, right?
Right. Oh, I know.
But he said something to me that resonated. He said, if you are making money for someone else, why can't you make it for yourself? And that triggered something in me. But I'll remember coming home for the first time after I just said goodbye to the corporate world. I've always said God will do taps on you, right? When it's time to exit something. And that year I went to the Christmas party And I remember sitting there and looking at Don and saying, I feel so out of place. Why do I feel so out of place here? He says, because it's time to go.
Right.
You know, it's that tap that the Lord, I always say, the Lord always gives us taps when it's time to exit from somewhere, right? So I said, okay, I'm going to surrender, right?
Beautiful word, by
right?
the way.
So I surrendered. I came home. And the first week, I think I went into the quiet time. Mm-hmm. You know, you have to go back into that quiet time and just listen for a little bit, right? But I thought it was more depression because I was always going, right? Get up in the morning.
Right.
You know,
That's a big change.
Right? A big change. So I felt like my body went into like this shock, and it probably did, right? Because you're used to doing, and your adrenaline's always going in the corporate world, right? Your adrenaline's always going. You're getting up in the morning, you're feeding your kids, you're getting them off to school, and off to work you go. And when I came home, it made me really realize that, wow, you know, I was working and really stressing out my body so much that it was almost like going into a detox, right? And I remember telling Don, you know, I don't know if this was the right decision for me. He says, well, right? I don't think this is not the right thing for me to do. What am I doing? Right. And I couldn't figure out, okay, do I just sit down, because this is so out of my element now, right? You know, he writes books, he's a speaker, and I just didn't understand that whole sequence of that, right? But again, I had to surrender and say, okay, Lord, whatever it is that you're doing in my life, I know it's for the good, mm-hmm. right? So as I went on, the first thing that he had me do was go out and do a women's book.
Wow.
So the first book that I did was the Power Mentorship for the Woman Entrepreneur.
Okay.
Which allowed me now to really think what a woman entrepreneur is. What is it that they do? But it allowed me also to think that women, we have so many hats, right? Do. You know, and it allowed me to think, okay, we have all these hats, and then we get lost, right? As a woman, we get lost. We allow ourselves to get so caught up in all of the craziness that happens, right? Feeding the kids, getting them off to school, feeding our husbands, getting our houses done, making sure everything's in order. And then I thought, so what happens to the purpose that we're here on life for, right? Where does that fit in for us? Because now, as a woman, we're lost. Right. Our purpose is everyday chores, was what I call them, right? But it allowed me to really think of when does a woman have to step back and really realize what her real purpose is? And are we really doing that? Mm-hmm. Some women do. Right? Some women don't. Correct. Because they go through their entire life thinking, again, a paradigm, right? Yeah. Because we're brought up a way, and we follow that whole sequence, mm-hmm. right? Our mothers, and my mom used to tell me this all the time, you take care of your husband. Right. Your husband comes first.
Right. There you go. Paradigm.
Right? And most women don't think that. No. You know, most women think their kids come first, then it's their husband. Correct. But what happens when your kids leave the home?
Uh-oh. Empty nest.
Right. And then what happens to your marriage?
Right. Real challenging.
It can be very challenging. So it helped me to realize that I think women have to go back and really realize that their husbands do come first, then it's their children. Right. Because your empty nest is going to come, and your relationship with your husband is no longer there. And it's either you're going to work really hard to rebuild it, or you're going to actually go separate ways, because now you've gone these two different paths. Correct. Right? So he did very good for me. He allowed me to go out, define who I really was. Right. And to this day, you know, I look back and I think, wow, if I didn't make that change, if I didn't take that leap of faith to go out there, I wouldn't really know who I really am, right?
Yeah, faith is so important, because regretfully, fear becomes before faith.
Yes.
And when you're fear-bound, you're going nowhere bound.
Yeah, absolutely.
And with faith, you just trust in God, the universe, and things happen.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a tough one to jump over.
Yeah.
I call it the terror barrier.
That's good.
Because
I like
we
that.
come up against it
All the time.
and we're not used to it.
Mm-mm.
It's a terror to get through it.
Yeah.
But you have to push through it.
Yeah.
That makes you different.
Yeah.
That makes you entrepreneurial.
Oh, thank you.
Yes. Yes, that's what it makes. But it's not an easy one. And you know
No,
the
it's
road.
not.
It wasn't easy for me.
No, it's not.
However, my first job, I had been in college. I had been in law school. I went an extra year at law school. Everything was dependent on me. I made all the decisions. I had to study hard. I had to get good grades. And the first job I took was a great job. It was the top financial planning firm in the country. And it was great. But the first day, I had 6 bosses.
Mm.
Who do I listen to first? And some contradicted each other.
I know that feeling.
Oh no, I mean, I was just like, this is not for me. That day, first day, I said, I'm going to spend 2 years studying and learning, working 7 days a week. I'm going to learn everything I can. But by that point, 2 years to the day, I went on my own. And I was petrified. I was scared to death. What was this other world I was jumping into? No, and I was not good at it. I was a student.
It's like a fish without water, right?
Right, right.
Yeah.
And I was lost.
Yeah.
I have to market for myself. I have to promote myself. And I have to pay bills. And they were big bills because I didn't know what I was doing. There was no mentor. I never had that mentor. So I, for 5 years, floundered. And then a guy named Brian Tracy came into my life and changed me instantly. He spoke at a national financial planning conference about success, about positivity. You can become anything you want to be. And I said, what did he say? Yeah, it was foreign language.
Yeah.
But I read every one of his books. I went to every seminar he did. And all of a sudden things changed. Because what he did is he reprogrammed that fear into faith. Mm-hmm. And I would have never gone further. I didn't take a salary for 5 years. So any change is a big change. You went through it.
Yeah, yeah.
You knew the corporate world, but
Yeah.
you didn't know the entrepreneurial world.
You know, it's interesting that you say that, you know, you can do anything that you want to do, right? You can be anything that you want to be, right? And I was brought up that way. My dad used to instill that in my head. You can do whatever you want. And I thought it was doing whatever I want in the corporate world because I didn't know anything else.
You don't know any different.
I didn't know any different. My dad worked in the corporate world. My mom tried to work in the corporate world. But, you know, that's all I knew. So, you know, I was blessed, I say, to meet my husband who's an entrepreneur and understood that, you know, because most women don't know that, you know, but I want them to know that you can do whatever it is that you want to do, and you have a purpose, but you have to define that purpose, what it is, and what it is that you want to do, you know. Dawn and I have now worked together for 19 years, and people say, how do you guys do it?
Right, how do you do it?
Well, you know, we were talking about that earlier, and I said, how do I really do it? Well, you know, it's about listening. It's about listening to each other without, and I'm not saying that we're perfect, right? Because we have had challenges where that, you know, I may think something's right, or he may think it's right.
You're always going to have that, challenges.
But it's all about the listening and defining what is right and talking it through. That's what's important, because If you already have it in your mind of where it is that you want to go and what it is, and this is how it's going to be, and that's it, and I don't care what you have to say, then it's going to put a challenge in your life, in your marriage, and everything that you do. But if you listen and you work through it and talk through it, my mom used to always tell me this: communication is the best thing that you can have in a marriage.
I agree. I
Right?
agree. That's the key
That's
differential.
the key, because if there's no communication in a marriage, then you have nothing. And I'm thankful that we both understand that, you know. We're able to sit down and look through things and say, maybe this way, or just take a listen to hear me out for a minute, you know,
That's
and
great.
we're able to do that. And I think that's one of the keys of how we've been able to work together for so long. You know, and every day, I mean, we do the movies all the time. And of course, I have one way and he has another. But if we look at both angles of it, then we come to a conclusion and say, okay, this is the direction that we're going to go.
Well, you've done so many movies. You've done such a great job.
Thank you.
I know that in Beyond the Secret, The Awakening, you did a great job. You had so many festivals
Yes.
that gave us awards. I was so honored that you did that.
Yes, I'm so thankful. We were awarded so many best documentary, you know, I was awarded Woman Director.
I love it. You deserved it.
Thank you.
And you know what? Beyond Limitations is going to even be even better.
Amen. I agree.
Because we have such extraordinary people in
Yes.
it.
Yes.
And you know, every day is a growing experience. And I think movies are the same thing. The more you do them, the more you learn, the better you are.
Absolutely.
And I think that's what you have done. You have grown so much. It's just amazing. And you know, even though the entrepreneurial world was a challenge for you, you broke through the terror barrier.
Absolutely.
And very few people do.
Yeah.
I would say that's the biggest challenge. Fear stops almost everybody.
Well, again, you know, I think I defined my purpose, and I think that's one of the things that you have to do. Just define where it is that you want to go and how you want to do it.
It's purpose. I believe it. Purpose, passion. You're not going to stop anybody. You know, when you know what you want and nothing is going to stop you. I think when I first met Don, I was so enamored by him and his books and his speaking. And I said, I want to be just like him. I want to do movies. And, you know, when I watch him do Carnegie Principle, our mastermind group, he's phenomenal. The teaching is absolutely amazing. I said, where'd this come from? It's amazing. I love it.
How could I not be better?
Yeah.
You know, look who I'm married to,
I
right?
know. You know, I'm a believer, a mentor, a husband. He's a combination.
Absolutely.
And you know what? The more you're around him, the better you are.
Yes, thank you.
Because he's an example. I mean, he's been an example for me. You know, I remember where I was when I first met him. I had been retired for a number of years, and that wasn't working for me.
Yeah.
And I was playing golf every day. And that was great. But the people around the golf course were really miserable. They thought beating golf and playing good golf was the answer. But they didn't realize golf is a four-letter word. It doesn't work. Oh my God, what I saw. And I said, this is not the atmosphere I want. I want to be with like-minded.
Yeah.
And I stopped. And I didn't know what I was going to be doing. But then I opened up the USA Today that day, a section I never have read before. It's called Life. And there it was, an ad. If you're unhappy with what you're doing, you're looking for your purpose, send away for these CDs. I knew they were talking to me. And that's where I met Don.
Yeah.
The CDs ended up going to a group that he was involved with, very involved with. I took all the levels they had. It was great for me. And then the day I met him changed my life that day.
Your teacher appeared.
Yeah, my teacher appeared, but it never had appeared before. I never had a mentor before.
You were never ready.
I was never ready. You know, when you say that, that's funny. I probably wasn't. But I didn't realize I wasn't ready.
Yeah.
And they always say something like, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. That was a big change for me. I went from retired to being trained on mindset, thinking, reading all his books, watching him speak. He's a great speaker. Yeah. I was just like in awe. And just like he was a mentor to you, he's been a mentor to me. And the more I'm around him, the more I talk to him, the better I am.
Yeah, and I think all of us need to learn how to be a student.
It is, I was a student in college, a student in law school. Then I went in the corporate world. I wasn't a student again. And really, it sounds easy, but you have to be ready, as you say.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And it took me a long time to be ready. And when you're ready, things happen. That's how you change.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and I remember you talking about the corporate world, and then you're in this foreign world. But when you went to that Christmas party, that was the first sign.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So I think life has a direction for us, right? Because I remember going into the corporate world and what I wanted to do in the corporate world. I wanted to be, I used to call him a suit person, right? Suit person to me was somebody who carried a briefcase, who took a train into downtown and went up this whole flight of stairs. That's my of how I envisioned it, right? I got there, took the train, had my suit on. I used to walk with my tennis shoes up to 3rd Street and Pershing Square in downtown Los Angeles. And I got there, and about 3 months into it, I went, what am I doing here in downtown Los Angeles? What if something happens? How am I going to get to my kids? All these things just went through my head. I thought, man, I have dreamed about this in my entire life. Why am I so miserable? And I think people have this vision of something, and then they get there, and then they realize, this is not really what I envisioned it was going to be, right? But again, that tap, right? It's the tap that we never pay attention to our entire lives.
And that's the key, what you just said. It's there, it's happening, but we're not listening. Listening is such an important skill. We're not trained to be listeners. We're trained to be talkers.
Right.
And a lot of people just never listen.
Yeah, yeah.
And as I say, they'll work to death, and there'll never be a change. Their paradigm is taken over. Mm-hmm. They will not allow that change to go on.
But it's because I think they're so programmed. We're so programmed from childhood. This is how it is. This is how you're going to retire. My dad, I don't know if you know this, but my dad was an embalmer for almost 40 years, right?
Oh my God.
I know, right?
Yeah. Wow.
That's what Don said.
Whoa.
He meant.
That's a thing I try to stay away from.
But one of the things that my dad really realized was that, all these people that would come in, right, as he used to call them his clients, would go through their entire lives working so hard, right? They retire, a month or 2 months go by, and they end up dying.
Yeah.
And they work so hard their entire lives, and they don't even realize that when they're gone, when they quit working, something happens to them inside, right? And I know what that is now because I went through that corporate world, right? And then I went in and I went in through this stress phase of being stressed my entire corporate world, right? And then when I became an entrepreneur and I finally came home and surrendered, right?
Keyword.
My body went into shock.
Sure, it's a big change.
So how many people go their entire life working this corporate world, working so hard? And I mean, you're talking 40, 50 years sometimes of nothing but constant stress in their body.
I saw it in my family. My father, he worked for the newspaper, and it wasn't enough income. So he worked 7 part-time jobs. He was always working every Saturday and Sunday, always working. And he never made it to retirement.
Wow.
And you know what? I said to myself, that's the best lesson I've ever learned. I'm not going to lead a life like he did. We never had enough money. We never had anything. I said, from now on, I'm going to make it, and I'm going to make it my way in my business, and I'm going to do it by helping others.
Yeah. Be happy what you do, right?
And I was grateful for everything I did. Well, this has been a great discussion. I never know how it was going to go, but boy, it went well.
Yes,
I know so much more about you now.
Good, I'm glad.
And done. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, you were just great. Thank you so much.